Today on Central Illinois on the Record, reaction after Republicans debate. A look at who won, who lost, and who may be done. Plus, a sit-down with the state treasurer, what he's saying about how his first year on the job has been impacted by not having a budget. And just in time for the holidays, the feds issue new rules for drone owners. Look at what it means for you.
Now, from your local election headquarters, this is Central Illinois on the Record.
Welcome to Central Illinois on the Record. I'm Paul Cicchini. There are 0 days of session remaining in Springfield in 2015. When the year ends, more than 180 days will have passed without a state budget. Now there's talk of new taxes or even an increase in the state's sales tax, but according to the experts, an income tax hike would be needed to raise the billions necessary to balance the state budget. Even if the legislature passes a tax increase in January, it will only have half its effectiveness for balancing the budget.
Implement some kind of tax increase, you've already lost half the fiscal year. So you've already lost half the revenue you would get.
For a person making $50,000 a year, increasing the tax would add another $600 to the tax bills. Because of its timing, any increase will only be half as effective as you heard. Now, as a result, experts say it's likely lawmakers will have to dip into 2017 and maybe 2018 to clean up the damage left by the last 6 months of operating without a budget. Gun reform is among the most contentious debates, not just in Washington, D.C., but also Illinois, where a state lawmaker is pushing for a change. The proposal is designed to strengthen current law, keeping guns out of the hands of felons or people who suffer from mental illness. It also targets those on the terror watch list. If someone breaks the law, police could get a warrant to search a home for someone's guns and FOID card. Under current law, people whose FOID cards have been revoked by the state must report the disposal of their guns to police. Gun stores across the state are saying no to any additional sales taxes. A proposal would prohibit local governments from taxing guns and ammunition. Gun owners say this added cost could hurt business. The proposed legislation in the State House would prohibit the addition of any new tax, fee, or other charges in addition to the normal sales tax. It would also cancel existing taxes. If the bill becomes law, it would take immediate effect. The state police can't buy new cars, and you can blame it on the lack of a budget. Governor Rauner halting purchases for state vehicles back in January. In 2009, the average mileage on a patrol car, more than 119,000. That's nearly 40,000 miles higher than recommended. Current law imposes a $1 fee on vehicle registrations to buy squad cars. Since then, ISP has purchased 2,100 cars. It's been months since the Secretary of State's office stopped mailing reminders for people to update their license plate stickers. That was an initiative to save money during this budget impasse. The office is urging drivers to go online and renew their plates. They can also pay online and sign up for reminder notices through email. By not mailing the notices, the Secretary of State's office saves $450,000 each month.
This is a revenue-generating office. For every dollar we spend, we bring in $28 to the state.
But the state treasurer says he can't raise money when the state continues to work without a budget. Mike Frerichs will complete his first year as treasurer in January. He's been able to enact several reforms by beginning his time in office with an audit, finding too many staff members worked as political campaigners. As Matt Porter explains, Frerichs eliminated that and was able to institute new investment programs, including one to help Illinois' most vulnerable people.
Hey Clifford, how are you doing?
Karina Dahl has an 18-year-old son with a degenerative disease that has robbed him of his sight and much of his speech.
Our son's needs change from year to year.
The disease has limited his mobility, requiring a ramp to be built at his home.
A savings account like that can really help people because those types of things are not generally covered by insurance and that sort of thing.
Treasurer Michael Frerichs said the new ABLE program will help parents invest in their children's future needs.
They can put aside money and grow tax-free to help give their children with special needs a brighter future.
Frerichs has also made a push to help low-income students with no budget. Colleges are less and less able to pay for state MAP grants.
As this is one group, these are poor students who don't have a lobbyist, they don't have a lawyer to advocate on their behalf, and so we decided to stand up and speak for them.
In the agency itself, he said the Treasury has had to limit investments as well, which will cost the state in the long run.
Every dollar we bring in is a dollar the General Assembly doesn't need to raise in taxes, or a dollar they don't have to make in painful cuts to important services.
The treasurer says when the General Assembly returns in the new year, he's not going to shy away from using his position to continue to encourage his former colleagues to reach a budget deal. Small businesses in the state will no longer have to wait until the last minute to invest in new equipment. A new measure passed by Congress will give them a tax break when making large purchases for things like machinery, office supplies, and computers. Under the measure, businesses can invest up to $500,000. For years, the tax relief was never permanent and very low, leaving some businesses on the fence about their expenses. The Department of Justice investigating the embattled Chicago Police Department. Mayor Rahm Emanuel initially resisted the idea of a federal civil rights investigation, calling it misguided. But he told reporters last week he now welcomes the DOJ's involvement.
We need, quote unquote, a fresh set of eyes like the Department of Justice to help us make the changes to both training, discipline, policy, oversight that we haven't had in the past, or the efforts we've made have never really gotten at the core of this issue.
The Justice Department will look into the Chicago Police Department's use of force, police accountability, and other matters. The probe comes after the release of dashcam video showing the 2014 shooting death of an unarmed African-American teen by a white Chicago police officer. That cop, Jason Van Dyke, is now charged with first-degree murder after shooting Laquan McDonald 16 times. Federal officials say the DOJ probe should last more than a year. Still ahead, putting patients first, how medical marijuana advocates are pushing for more comprehensive care. But first, Republican presidential candidates debate for the last time in 2015 to look at the performances and what's next.
I am totally committed to the Republican Party. I feel very honored to be the front runner.
Donald Trump says the GOP can count on him to remain a Republican throughout the presidential contest. And on debate night, several candidates showed no fear in going after one another as the CNN debate focused on national security. Andrew Spencer takes a look at some of those confrontations.
Donald, you're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency.
Jeb Bush and Donald Trump got into several verbal sparring matches Tuesday night.
The simple fact is, if you think this is tough and you're not being treated
this
fairly,
isn't tough and easy.
Imagine what it's going to be like dealing with Putin, or dealing with President Xi, or dealing with the Islamic terrorism that exists. This is a tough business to run for president.
I know, you're a tough guy, Jeb.
And we need to have a leader that is...
Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio focused a lot on each other, arguing over the future of undocumented workers.
Ted, you support legalizing people who are in this country illegally.
I led the fight against his legalization and amnesty bill.
And their respective voting records regarding national security.
I told voters in Texas that I would oppose the federal government having the authority to detain U.S. citizens permanently with no due process.
So if you're an American citizen and you decide to join up with ISIS, we're not going to read you your Miranda rights. You're going to be treated as an enemy combatant, a member of an army attacking this country.
Senator Rand Paul and Governor Chris Christie got into it again, as they have in past debates. In supporting a no-fly zone over Syria, Christie said he'd have Russian planes shot down for violating it, which Paul said could potentially start World War III.
We think about the judgment of someone who might want World War III. We might think about someone who might shut down a bridge because they don't like their friends. They don't want to, they want to get a Democrat.
I'm Andrew Spencer reporting.
Republicans will meet next in Iowa on January 16th. Later in the show, our On the Record panel will break down this last debate of the year and what it means for the GOP candidate campaigns. President Obama says the fight against ISIS continues to move forward with urgency, and the U.S.-led coalition is hitting the terror group harder than ever. Mr. Obama made the comments from the Pentagon on Monday, where he met with his National Security Council.
More people are seeing ISIL for the thugs and the thieves and the killers that they are. We've seen instances of ISIL fighters defecting. Others who've tried to escape have been executed, and ISIL's reign of brutality and extortion continues to repel local populations and help fuel the refugee crisis.
The president says ISIS has lost 40% of land it once held in Iraq, but he admits progress is slow going against the terrorists in Iraq and Syria. Obama's rare Pentagon visit is meant to show how serious his administration approaches its ISIS strategy. The federal government is reviewing how immigrants are screened and whether to use social media. The announcement comes during the investigation following the massacre in San Bernardino. Tashfeen Malik, one of the shooters, posted 2 years ago on social media she wanted to be part of jihad. The Department of Homeland Security says 3 pilot programs were started in 2014 regarding whether screening social media is lawful and respects privacy protections. The Democratic National Committee is suspending Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign from accessing its voter database. This after a campaign staffer took advantage of a software error to access Hillary Clinton's confidential voter information. The suspension is a setback for the Vermont senator because the database is a goldmine of information about voters nationwide. Campaigns usually use that data to plot their next moves. A Sanders spokesman said the staffer's behavior is unacceptable and the person was fired immediately. The Sanders campaign will remain suspended until it provides the DNC with a full explanation of the episode and provides proof that any access data has been discarded. Still to come, drone wars, the new rules for the unmanned aircraft as sales soar ahead of the holiday. But first, taking the debate stage for the final time in 2015, our panel breaks down the GOP presidential performances.
You're watching Central Illinois on the Record.
All right, welcome back. Joining the panel this week to talk about the Republican presidential debate from the Peoria Journal-Star, Chris Kiergaard, and from the Illinois Republican Party, Mike Bigger. Thank you both for being here this week. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, so let's get right into it. Of course, the Republican presidential candidates debate for the last time in 2015. They do so on CNN. Let's start with the biggest winner. Chris?
I think, honestly, the biggest winner out of this one came out as Marco Rubio. He looked poised, he looked in control, he took the fight to Ted Cruz on some things, and to Donald Trump on correcting him on an issue that helped show what Rubio knows about foreign policy.
Mike, your biggest winner of the night.
You know, I think Rubio and Cruz both did very well, and I think still Trump came out relatively unscathed, so I think he's still right there. I don't think he really lost or hurt himself in any way, and I think Jeb hitting him real hard, and I thought there were debates within the debate this time, which was fascinating. But I would think Rubio, Cruz, by far were the two leaders. I don't think Trump hurt himself at all, and I think Jeb was very desperate to remain relevant and engage and be part of the process. I don't know how much gain he got out of it, though, totally.
So is Jeb Bush the biggest loser?
Not so sure he's the biggest loser, but I think he is looking increasingly desperate in trying to regain and establish relevancy and get his name out there. I think going into the Iowa caucuses, if he doesn't make a big move, and some of the others, it's going to be the end of the story for some of them, frankly. I just don't see Jeb gaining the traction that he's going to need to be viable and the top-tier candidate that we all thought he would be.
Yeah, it certainly seems shocking in that regard, no doubt. Chris, your biggest loser of the night.
I would tend to think that Mike's right there, and there is some concern about Jeb Bush. I think he's always played better in a crowd not on television. He doesn't do nearly as well in the debates to set himself apart, and the line that he was sounding here, well, some of us may have really appreciated it, that you can't insult your way to the presidency, it does not necessarily play quite as well with a base that's especially upset about things that are going on today.
Yeah, obviously the Republican primary is far different, I think, than what we see in the general election. But I also find it interesting that the two of you said Marco Rubio was among the biggest winners, because it seemed that a lot of the immediate reaction to the debate, maybe it's now that we've had a chance, a few days to digest, but that Rubio was one of the big losers of the night because he seemed to lose those exchanges with Ted Cruz.
I mean, maybe to a certain extent, but I think he's pretty unflappable, and I think he isn't easily rattled. And although it was an intense exchange, and Cruz is by far is an excellent debater, and I think has an advantage over most of those folks. I think he's very comfortable in that format. I think it's perfect for Ted Cruz. But I still think Rubio, in all the discussions, there's talk of the Democrats, the Clinton campaign. He's the guy that they fear as the nominee, and I think that he really has a lot of support, and I don't think he lost a lot of traction in this debate at all, actually.
Chris, when it comes to that debate about the immigration issue and the Gang of Eight, and you heard Ted Cruz go after Marco Rubio, calling it the Rubio-Schumer immigration bill, do you think that the intricacies of that immigration plan kind of go over the heads of most viewers, and that's why people thought, you know, Ted Cruz kind of came out because he was sharper with one-liners?
I think they do at this stage of it, when again you're trying to play to your base in a primary election. But I think once you get into the general election, once you get into some of these primaries and caucuses, particularly open ones where people can change registration between primaries and may have voted as a Democrat last time, may vote as a Republican this time. I think there's a little more cross-party appeal to something like that. It's an old political trick to try to pin someone down by saying that they are the Rubio X or ex-Rubio legislation and pin them to an unpopular Democrat. People used to do that with Ted Kennedy legislation all of the time on things. You could have done it with No Child Left Behind, and people did with that being a Boehner-Kennedy piece of legislation.
All right, well, we're going to push pause on our conversation about the debate, and when we come back, maybe some changes in 2016 and who may need to step aside. We'll be right back with Central Illinois on the Record.
You're watching Central Illinois on the Record.
Welcome back to Central Illinois on the Record. We are talking about the Republican presidential debate, the last one in 2015. And joining the panel, Mike Bigger from the Illinois Republican Party and Chris Kjærgaard from the Peoria Journal-Star. Now, I want to pick up our conversation about some changes. Everybody wants to make a New Year's resolution going into 2016. If you could change something about this debate format that we have, Mike, what would you do?
Well, I think we have to narrow the field. I mean, really drastically. The undercard debate, I think, frankly, needs to go away because some of those folks are just simply not going to go anywhere. And I think we need to narrow it down. For me, I would like to see it narrowed down to basically 3 or 4 very viable candidates and have some debates in that regard and really vet these people and let them develop their talking points and really have an engagement within a smaller group. Because I think the entertainment value of this format is excellent, and I think it's driving the viewership up. But at some point, the voters are going to say, okay, enough's enough. Some of these people have to go, and who are the ones that are really viable and we really want to zero in on? So that's what I'd like to see, is narrow the field down relatively quickly.
Chris, yeah.
I absolutely agree. It's time for the undercard debate to go away. It served its utility, and if you aren't able to break out of that group by now, you're probably not going to break out. You probably don't have the money to break out from it, and you're tired of being a U.S. senator or a governor and having to stay in a Motel 6 to keep your campaign financially viable. Second thing, I think that would at least provide a different level of interest. We've heard a lot from panelists during these debates asking questions. I would love to see actual Iowa and New Hampshire voters in a town hall setting with a more limited number of these candidates asking them questions to see what's resonating with the public from their messages. I think that would give us a totally different dynamic than we've been seeing with some of the questions that professional media, Washington and New York-based media are asking. I think the concerns of ordinary citizens may be slightly different.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing the issues that are polling well, and that seems to be the way that we're getting a lot of course, the questions and the candidates on stage. So, Mike, if you were going to pare it down tomorrow and decide the next debate field, who are I'll give you 5 candidates.
Oh, okay. Well, I think, Trump clearly has to be there, Cruz, Marco Rubio. I think Jeb Bush still has to be there. And then I think it's almost a toss-up for some of the others. I think Chris Christie is very viable, especially as the conversation has turned more to national security, terrorism, and safety type things. I think he resonates in that regard. So I would think those would be my group that I would look at. And the others, I frankly just don't see them. Kasich from Ohio, I know Ohio is very important in the presidential election in the past, but I just don't see him getting traction. And it's shocking to me, particularly in Illinois, where he has a lot of the establishment, the real strong power brokers in the state behind him, and I just don't see that his national candidacy is coming together. So I think those 5 would be my choice.
Chris, same question. You get 5.
I would go with the same 5, and something we really didn't mention before that strikes me is how quickly Ben Carson has lost any altitude whatsoever here, and a lot of that comes from this really turning as a foreign policy related presidential contest at this point with everything going on with ISIS in Syria and elsewhere, that Carson has shown that he's not prepared there. He needs to be one to go very quickly.
Well, and his campaign almost stuck in the stake for him by saying that he's just not prepared when it comes to foreign policy issues, and he tried to make some hires, and you just didn't see him shine when given an opportunity, a debate focused entirely on foreign policy. Well, thank you both for joining the panel this week. I appreciate the conversation. We'll have to have you join us again in 2016 to break down the next one, which will be carried by Fox News. All right, Chris Kjærgaard with the Peoria Journal-Star, Mike Bigger with the Illinois Republican Party. Still ahead on Central Illinois on the Record, petitions for patients, how medical marijuana advocates are trying to get additional ailments approved. And own a drone? A look at the new rules that mean you have to register that unmanned aircraft. New rules are in place for drone owners and operators. The Federal Aviation Administration says the unmanned aircraft must be registered. That means drones must be marked with a unique registration number. People can register drones starting tomorrow. It costs $5 and must be renewed every 3 years. People who want to add more ailments to the list of conditions that can be treated with medical marijuana will get their chance next month. The Department of Public Health will accept petitions starting January 1st. This is one of 2 annual changes the program allows. So far, no new conditions have been added to the current list of 39. And former House Speaker Dennis Hastert is recovering from a stroke. He's been hospitalized since early November. His attorney says it happened shortly after he pleaded guilty in a federal hush money case. Hastert agreed in October to plead guilty to hiding money transactions from federal investigators, avoiding a public trial. His sentencing hearing is scheduled for February 29th. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Central Illinois on the Record. Of course, you can stay in touch with us using social media. Connect with WMBD and me on Facebook and Twitter using the hashtag CIOTR, and we will see you next week.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of WMBD, WYZZ, or Nexstar Broadcasting Group.